All right, as I was taking a look at a lot of the discussions for data normalization this week, I saw a lot of academic discussions, examples, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but sometimes it's good to match some actual working models of normalization and having them come into play and then actually having them used later on. For those of you that don't know Access, I have no expectation for you to build items specifically in Access. However, I'm using that as the best example of doing so. What I've done is I've created 3 tables, and to kind of give you a background where Access is concerned, you have tables that store your data, and then queries kind of allow you to shuffle or answer or ask questions of your data so you can put it together. And what I did is, rather than sit here and watch me design and type in all this information and basically go crazy, what I did was, if I already created the information, I'll kind of walk you through it. Now, the idea behind data normalization is you are making data elements where you don't repeat information. It makes it easy to update, it makes it easy to relate to, and things along those lines. So for instance, if you have an employee data table and only the employee information about the employee data, maybe their payroll, maybe their first name, last name, of course, their address, their phone number, as well as some of their education is all in the employee data table. Well, then when it comes time to update the employee, if they have a change, it's very easy to do because everything's located in one particular location. Whereas if later on you have an employee move or an employee gets married or something like that, once again, one particular location. Whereas if you string out the information, if you have, let's say, a class list where your employee is teaching it, and in addition to that you put their phone number in there and you put their address in there, and then you have an employee data table where you put your phone number in there, the address in there, and then you might have a 1099 table where you put their address in there and their information in there. In each one of these cases, now you have a situation where you have duplicate information down to their name, down to their phone number, down to their address. Have it in one place, you're good to go. So what I've done is I've created an employee data table and some very, very basic information. What I did is I had the first name, the last name, the phone number, and the education all in, as well as the state, all in one particular location. Make it kind of easy to work with and things along those lines. So let me just draw up my education here. And then what I did was, now you'll notice I have an employee ID right here. Now the reason I have an employee ID is, more than likely while that employee is with your company, they're only going to have one employee ID, and it normally doesn't change unless you change your numbering system. A lot of times people used to have their employee IDs based on Social Security number, but obviously due to security issues and things along those lines, that is now changing. So in my particular example, this is one for teachers. So you've got the first name, the last name, the phone number, or instructors, the address, the city, the state, and whatever their educational degree is. Now, I also have a class list, and what I did with the class list is you have your class name, you have your college. Now I just made it really, really basic for this, but the idea is as I was putting this together, you could add on credit number, how many credits it's worth, what requirements it is for that particular instructor to teach it. So you have to make sure if you're going to assign an instructor to teach a class that has and they have a certain educational background in order to teach it, and things along those lines. There's lots of different things you can do, but once again, this is our basic. But what's interesting is our line number in our case is unique. You'll notice if I look at line number, each one of them are unique. Employee data, the employee ID, each one of them is unique. And what the idea behind these numbers are, it allows me to put the information together. I've normalized this data, so if my class name ever changes for engineering 0001, or that it changes to a different college, all I have to do is go into this particular table and make the change. So I don't have to, if I repeated that data in a, let's say a class schedule for a different year, or I repeated that data later on for a different college information list or something along those lines, the issue is then going to be, well, I have all these different places to input the data. And okay, it makes a little bit of extra effort. True, I've only got 3 or 4 records here, but when you start to compound that and make more and more and more and more, the time-consuming nature of it gets huge. Additionally, the more times a person enters in data or touches a database, the more chances there are for an error. And that's what we're trying to prevent. You're trying to prevent an error. So if you go in here and you only enter it once, it's in one particular location. And if there is an error, guess what? You go to that one location and you make the changes. If it's entered in 5 or 6 different locations and you have an error, you have to go find it in some of those locations, and you get someone digging at the data and digging at the database trying to figure out where that's at. Some people call it like data mining, trying to find all the information. One of the things that I've done some consulting for individuals, and when they don't have the data normalized, I'll look at a table. It'll have the information in it. I'll make the changes to the information. And when you look at a report, the information's still wrong. Well, that tells me that the information is stored in 2 or 3 different places. Or I'll make a change and then something else is wrong, or it's not based off that table. And it gets very messy if tables aren't, if databases or DBMS, because Access is a database management system, aren't designed correctly from the get-go. And a lot of times when people come along and they try to fix somebody else's mistakes, they get frustrated with it and just rip it all down and start again, which is a whole different time-consuming process. But at some point in time, it's actually worth doing that. So I've got my employee data. Now back to my example here that has the employee ID number, and my class list that has the line number. Now, if I take a look at my fall schedule here, right, I've got my begin time, my end time, my building, my room number. Now notice the instructor that's assigned is with the instructor number. My line number that's assigned is with the line number, I guess. And then of course the start date and end date will change. But when I actually created these things, I actually created a lookup table. Now this is an Access and you don't necessarily have to worry about this, but this just gives you an example. I've actually created where it has this drop down menu based off of the information stored in the employee database. The employee table. So I can look at this and go, oh, look, I can choose whatever one it is, and I know the person it's responsible for. The neat thing about this particular drop down, that's me pointing at the screen, just looks weird. The neat thing about basing that drop down list off the actual tables where the data's at, if the table where the data's at is updated, so does this list actually update. So you have the synergy, but with the idea of normalization and then kind of linking it all together. So as things update, you can see those updates not only in the original table, but also in the things that it actually utilizes. The same thing with the line numbers here. I get to see what it actually is. It's Intro to Civil Engineering. I'd have to make them longer, of course, or college algebra or whatever. So I can actually go through. Now, when we start to get to the meat and potatoes of things, is I can use those normalized tables with the unique numbers in them to pull out the information that is unique. So first name, last name, address, phone number, things along those lines, dependent upon how I want to do it. And in my case, I created a 2017 fall detail schedule. So if I'm going to run this real quick, and it'll give you kind of idea. Now, normally I wouldn't put the employee ID number on there, but I could have first name and last name. Here's my start date, end date, so I know the instructor teaching it. I also know the building, the room number. Here's my line number, and then my actual class name. So I'm actually creating a schedule. But each one of these are linked back to the data normalized table using those those unique identifiers or the unique IDs. So it's plucking the information using those unique IDs in a normalized table out of it to create this query that allows a person to see an overall report or an overall schedule that has that data. The interesting thing is, for instance, last name Barnes. Let's say I'm dealing with my last name, which is Barnes, right? And for some reason, Bob Barnes changed his name. So I'm going to go ahead and close this table, I'm going to go to the employee data table, and there's Barnes. Maybe it was misspelled. Let's go with that. So his name is actually Bob Smith, right? Great. Okay. So now if I come along to my details step 2 and I open it up again, notice the last name has changed because it utilizes that data normalized table to pull the information from and to go and get it. This will also work with my class list. If this is, let's say, Intro to Civil Engineering changes to Intro to Engineering, right? It's still in the College of Engineering. Great. So I've done that. Now I can go over to my fall detail 2. Now you'll notice it'll be Intro to Engineering still. So what I have to do is I have to close it, or I don't think we get it. No, I don't. Okay. So then I can just open it up again, kind of refresh it, and you'll notice it says Intro to Engineering over here. Since they're in data normalized tables, the information is in one place. If I shuffle the information together later on using those unique identifiers, I can then utilize that on my follow-on schedules because all the data kind of follows down and trickles through to make sure it's all connected. If it was stored different places, you know, I went and I changed his last name from Barnes to Smith. If his name was changed or his name was stored in 5 or 6 different locations, I would have to go to each one of these locations and change it to Smith. Well, maybe I went to one location and I didn't give it a capital Smith. Maybe I went to another location and I changed it to Smiths with an S. And as a result, it made it more difficult to change. So it's much more time consuming and it's a much greater chance of having an error. So I want to make absolutely sure that information is in one place, makes it really easy to track down errors, makes it really easy to update information, and generally gives a much more efficient feel, well, and it does make your database management system much more efficient. Well, I hope to see you on Friday, Central Time, 1300. And I hope this example of normalization helps you out. Thank you very much. You have a good day.